Call It Courage by Armstrong Speary. Chapter 4, Drums. Let's go ahead and get started, and let's continue on our second part. Kiwi the albatross came and went on his mysterious errands, emerging out of blue space, vanishing into it again. At sundown, regularly, the white bird came wheeling and circling to alight clumsily on the beach almost at Mafatu's side, while Yuri pranced about and greeted his friend after his own fashion. As for Yuri, he was having the time of his life, for there were countless seabirds nesting along the shore to be chased and put to rout, and wild goats and pigs in the mountains to make life exciting enough for any dog. Mafatu had discovered a mulberry tree. He stripped off the bark and removed the inner white lining. Then he wet the fiber and laid it upon a flat stone and set about beating it with a stick of wood. The fiber spread and grew thinner under the persistent beating. The boy added another strip, wet it, and beat it into the first one, then another and another. Soon he had a yard of cloth to serve as a parade. It was soft and white, and now at last he was clothed. Before I go home, I will make a dye of ava and paint a fine design on my parade. The boy promised himself, I must not go back ill-clothed and empty-handed. Men must know that I have conquered the sea and made the land serve me as well. The days had passed in a multitude of tasks that kept Mafatu busy from dawn till dark. His lean-to grew into a three-sided house with bamboo walls and a thatch of palm leaves. The fourth wall was open to the breezes of the lagoon. It was a trim little house, and he was proud of it. A roll of woven mats laid on the floor. There was a shelf in the wall with 3 bowls cut from coconut shells. Bone fish hooks dangled from a peg. There was a coil of tough sennit, many feet long. An extra paru of tapa, waterproofed with gum of artu tree for wet weather. All day long, the wind played through the openings in the bamboo walls, and at night, lizards scurried through the thatch with soft rustlings. One morning, wandering far down the beach, Mafatu came upon a sheltered cove. His heart gave a leap of joy, for there, white gleaming in the sun, was all that remained of the skeleton of a whale. It might not have meant very much to you or to me, but to Mafatu it meant knives and fish hooks galore, splintered bones for darts and spears, a shoulder blade for an axe. It was a verifiable treasure trove. The boy leaped up and down in his excitement. Yuri, he shouted, we're rich. Come, help me drag these bones home. His hands seemed all thumbs in his eagerness. He tied as many bones as he could manage into 2 bundles. One bundle he shouldered himself, the other Yuri dragged behind him, and thus they returned to the campsite, weary but filled with elation. Even the dog, seemed to have some understanding of what this discovery meant, or if not, he was at least infected with the master's high spirits. He leaped about like a sportive puppy, yapping until he was hoarse. Now long now began the long process of grinding the knife and the axe, hour after long hour, squatting before a slab of basalt. Mafatu worked and worked until his hands were raw and blistered, and sweat ran down into his eyes. The knife emerged first, since that was the most imperative. Its blade was 10 inches long, its handle a knob of joint. It was sharp enough to cut the fronds of coconut trees, to slice off the end of a green nut. But it was a splendid knife. All Fatu's skill went into it. It would be a fine weapon as well, the boy thought grimly as he ground it down to a sharp point. Some sea robber had been breaking into the bamboo trap, and he was going to find out who the culprit was. Probably that old hammerhead shark who was always cruising around just as if he owned the lagoon. Fishing with a line took too long when you were working against time. Mafatu could not afford to have his trap robbed. Twice it had been broken into, the stout bamboos crushed, and the contents eaten. It was the work either of a shark or an octopus, that was certain. No other fish was strong enough to snap the tough bamboo. Mafatu's mouth was set in a grim line as he worked ahead of his away on his knife. That old hammerhead, undoubtedly, he was a thief. Mafatu had come to recognize him, for every day when the boy went out with his trap, that shark, larger than all the others, was circling around, wary and watchful. The other sharks seemed to treat the hammerhead with deference. Chapter 4, Part 2.